Muses of Mythology is a spoiler-heavy podcast.
That's an understatement.
We're going to discuss not just the events of this book, but the Rhineverse as a whole, and really anything that we feel is relevant. You can find full spoiler warnings in the show notes.
I think he's got Batrick.
No, not Batrick! No! Okay, sorry. Puppy's getting banished. I don't feel bad about you.
Poor baby.
Yeah.
Batrick. He's an orange bat.
That's so cute.
No, he's not for you. You have so many toys.
It's as big as he is.
Tiny little dog.
Welcome to Muses of Mythology, a podcast where we explore how ancient myths become part of modern pop culture through the lens of Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. This is Story 69, Hades. I'm your co-host and podcasting muse, Darien and Smartt. Joining me is my co-host and brother, DJ.
How's everybody doing today? I am the muse of deals. I make them. I inspire them. I make sure that they go through.
Okay. I'm sure we'll elaborate on that quite a bit here in a minute.
Yeah. Let's muse about a deal I have for you in the garden.
What? All right, DJ, we are back and we are continuing our very thorough examination of the underworld and its various inhabitants.
That we are.
And today we are joined by a first-time guest, someone who I am so excited to have on our show. It is fellow Percy Jackson podcaster, Manasa from Camp Half Pod is here with us.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay, we're happy to have you here. We haven't had a new guest in a while.
It's been a minute.
Oh, really? Oh, man. I'm very, very honored.
I'm running out of guests.
Oh.
Just cycle through everyone on the Discord.
I was going to say, we have a little pool that we pull from, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I have to start cold emailing authors of best-selling books to see if they'll come play with us.
I mean, that's amazing. If you get anybody, is there a dream person you have in mind?
Yes, I really want B. Fitzgerald, author of Girl Goddess Queen, to come talk to us about Persephone.
Oh, that would be amazing.
It's such a good book. It just came out. We'll see. If it doesn't happen, she's a busy woman. She's writing other books. It's fine. But we're not talking about Persephone today. We are talking about her husband.
Willing participant, Hades.
Yeah. You picked this episode topic. Tell us why.
I love Hades. I mean, the real reason I love Hades is, I don't know if you guys, this might be a deep cut, but when I was in elementary school, I read this series called Have a Hot One, Hades.
Ooh, no, what?
And it's a series, I think there are about 5 books. When I was growing up, there might have been more. I just grew out of them. Where it's all of mythology retold from Hades' perspective, but Hades is actually just a really cool dude, and it's super slangy. And the second book is called Phone Home Persephone, and that was my favorite one. And it's kind of and it's all about how he one day was walking home, and this girl who was kind of annoying followed him home. But Zeus, who's the evil villain in this, wrote is the one who writes all myths, and so he made this whole fake story up about how Hades kidnapped her. It was very cute. I think they're at most 100 pages. They're for elementary school kids, and so I always had a soft spot for Hades because of it. And then I grew up and realized that he's like all men in Greek mythology, super problematic, and that was really disappointing to learn. But I always loved him in Persephone.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That is the perfect thing for this show. Oh my gosh, I'm so delighted. Fantastic. Well, let's get into it. I guess the first thing I'm going to have to ask is, usually I have DJ tell us what he remembers about Hades from the Percy Jackson books, but actually I want to start with, how do you feel about Hades in the Percy Jackson books?
I like that he's kind of slimy. I think it fits all of the gods being kind of slimy. I mean, much like Percy, his description is not what I imagined. For me, a lot of the characters in my brain are automatically people of color because if I like them, they're a reflection of myself. And so Percy in my brain was always, a brown kid. And so reading when Logan Lerman, who I love, love Logan Lerman, was cast, I was like, oh,
right cast, wrong movie.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, for me to see Percy as like a white boy was really surprising. And I was like, remember, I mean, he never gets specifically said that he's a white boy, but like, again, Hades is like super pale and he's like very slimy and he's very grumpy. He's very upset about being in the underworld and he's just very envious and not a great person. I think it's a really good description of how he is in the myths. I think it could have made him seem more powerful because he kind of seems very like third place compared to Poseidon and Zeus. I also think it's really strange that his children is like literally canonically like Hitler and Mussolini.
Yeah.
But it makes sense too, so you know.
That's the thing that we've just never walked back.
Yeah, exactly. We just like let it go. Like Nico's half brother is Hitler is kind of rough, man.
Yeah. It is super distressing. It's like, yeah, your half brother is Nico, who is gay. Your half brother is Hitler. Hazel, who is black. Your half brother is Hitler. It's like, neat, Rick.
Rough.
The optics, Rick. The optics.
Oh, man. But I want to hear about you guys' like perspective on like, did you guys always think that Hades kind of looked like this pale man who's like with greasy hair?
No, he definitely was blue and his hair was on fire for me because I grew up watching Disney's Hercules on VHS.
Yes.
I think I'm in the same boat, just like a different model, but he's still blue with his hair on fire, but he's not the one from Hercules. He's like,
but just that
just
aesthetic.
a tall, slender man in like black cloaks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It very much is we are a Disney Hercules defenders. We think the movie is good, actually.
The movie's very fun.
And the music is so good, and the story is so good. Is it accurate factually? No, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Matter. Our whole podcast is about asking, does it matter? And the answer is always, no, actually, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Did we have fun?
Yes, and that's what matters.
But no, I think for me and the way Hades is portrayed, it feels like Rick Riordan is like clashing in between like two, on one hand trying to portray the Hades of myth in that just like set apart, very serious, very following the law of life and death, but like will adhere to like his word essentially. And then flip side, you just have almost just standard villain because death bad.
Yeah.
And it's perplexing. Because I almost think the fact that Hades appears in the first book is a thing that has hindered later depictions of the character or Riordan's attempts to like lean more into like a nuanced version of the god of the underworld. Because in the first book, he's not the villain, but his cloak is described as having souls of the tormented dead in them. And he's described as looking like Hitler. And he's described as, I kidnapped your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to be fair, he also believed that he had his crown, his shadow crown.
Yeah.
So he's like, I want you my shadow crown so you can have your mom back.
Helm of darkness.
Yeah, shadow crown.
Shadow crown is better, actually. We're going to put a pin in it for a second, but I do agree. How is him kidnapping Sally Jackson not part of those ancient laws that Chiron and everyone else are always like bitching about?
She was about to die anyway. It's a loophole.
Yeah, I guess he gets to, it's his domain at that point. It's his realm. So technically he saved her a little bit and then gets to keep her. I mean, why does he have Persephone? Like, there's a lot of questions that we have to ask.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say time again, the ancient laws are just plot mechanic that Rick uses when he wants to say, because this, that's why, don't ask me. Because this, because I said so, don't worry about it. And they will come and go as needed.
Yeah, and it keeps things more middle grade book rather than like just violent death everywhere and assault and all the
monsters
bad stuff.
And we don't want that. Like, for real, that's not what I'm looking for in these books. You saying, DJ?
Monsters poof into powder.
They do.
Yeah, they do.
They do. It is
dust. They do not leave a corpse. They do not shed blood.
Yeah, it is something that Owen has been trying to figure out for months over on Through the Myth.
It's like, where did they
Why
go?
they do that?
Owen.
They go to Tartarus. We know that much at least.
Yeah, but why?
that's
No, we
true.
can't. Go listen to that episode, gang. It's great.
Completely different tangent. I mean, speaking of tangents, I always thought that the depiction of like Hades being like grungy, which is cool. Like he's punk. It gives Nico an outlet for his hot topic obsession. But so like in Greek mythology, there's no like difference between heaven and hell. There's just sections of the underworld for different crimes or different places for you to go. So Hades is overseeing all of that. So he is both the person who enforces good things and bad things. So why is he depicted in such like a grungy way is always been my question.
Yeah, I feel like that is the leaning into death as inherently bad.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of playing like the villain aspect of like, oh, it's very grungy and
Dirty.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
The Christians are to blame for that. We know this for a fact. They're just rolling up and equating Hades with Satan. This is their fault.
Well, it's not their fault that nobody ever wanted to talk about Hades.
We'll get to that.
That's true, and say his name and stuff. I did like how Rick Riordan did a better job of like when Pluto walked in, Pluto was a lot more stable, I feel like, as a father. Like, Hades was whiny, but Pluto was a lot more, he was colder, but he was a lot more stable and less just like a...
He was a businessman. Now he's dealing in gold.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, we go from used car dealer to I have old money.
Oh, yes, that's what it is.
So
It's
I
old
invested
money.
in
That's the
gold.
exact vibes.
Mm-hmm. Or
All
oil,
buried
my
under a tree.
great-grandfather.
Yeah.
Yep. It's all buried under a tree. Oh my gosh. So I think last thing I want to talk about is how Hades in the books can compete with Hera for just most misplaced rage.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
In the cursing of the oracle after Zeus kills Maria D'Angelo. And how do we feel about that as like a depiction of Hades?
I feel like it's pretty accurate, though. Like, you look at... Yes, but it's very accurate to how the gods react, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Apollo and all of them. Even reading Trials of Apollo now, when Apollo has to tell everyone what his reaction is to them, like all the people he's like maimed and killed because they beat him in a competition and stuff like that. All of these gods have such short tempers, and they misdirect all of their energy because all of their energy should be going to Zeus.
Yes.
But it never can.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of lame, I thought, of Hades, obviously, especially since he's already been depicted as like a used car salesman.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh man, like he's just not that cool of a dude. But I felt like it was accurate.
Yeah, I agree. You said you thought it was short-sighted?
I mean, it kind of is, right? The oracle came out, gave a thing saying the next child to be bad, and so they blamed it on, or they attacked Hades' most recent children for it.
Mm-hmm.
So he just went into a rage because he got bad news.
Yeah, it wasn't even like, oh, next child will be bad. It's like, one of your kids is gonna be real powerful and influence things. So, do with that what you will.
Yeah.
And Zeus decided, all right, I want control of all the kids. And Hades didn't do what I said, so I'm going to try to kill him. And then Hades like, well, I'm going to curse the oracle who said the prophecy. And I'm glad you mentioned Apollo, because you know who never brought this fact up? Apollo. Feels weird.
That's true.
He seems so unconcerned with the fact that his primary oracle just was trapped in a decaying body for several decades.
Maybe he did have a problem with it. It just happened off screen.
Bet, yeah.
Oh, that's true. But also, all of his oracles went through something like that, and he doesn't process it or even acknowledge it until he's immortal in Trials of Apollo.
Yeah, this is a good point. It's all about learning. Overthrow Zeus, win, is what I have to say about this.
Technically, he did it to one of his oracles himself. He
Yeah.
cursed the oracle
That's
to
true,
live forever. Even her body will decay, but
Yeah, Sibylline.
your soul won't.
Yep. I'm going to have us back away from Trials of Apollo real quick, just for safety, for Manasa, just because you're on the last book and it's too easy for us to get swept up in thought. So It's about Hades anyway. It's okay. It's so much, but it's also very little. Hades is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like we could do the things that, like, oh, here's what everyone knows, right? It's like, Hades, oldest son of Rhea and Kronos, swallowed by Kronos, rescued by Zeus, Titan war, beat the Titans, they all pulled lots, which that is actually from the Iliad. Didn't know until today.
Nice.
That piece, Poseidon is talking about it, and he's telling someone about, like, yeah, we all pulled lots, and I got the ocean, and Hades got the underworld, and Zeus got the sky. So, not sure what context that is in, but...
In Have a Hot One, Hades, the children's book, he plays a card game, and Zeus cheats, and that's how Zeus gets the sky.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a villain. An old-timey
Yes, he's a villain.
Rightly so. That's interesting. So it's like, oh, Zeus cheats to get the sky, or like when they draw lots, it's always like interpretations of this cite that Hades is resentful of this fact and doesn't like that he's in the underworld. But there's really nothing to suggest that in like mythological stories. Now, to be fair, it's probably because he doesn't do much in not as little as Icarus does, which is the one thing, and that's
The
it.
one thing.
But really, dying, flying badly. But the one story where Hades is like a very active participant, like the inciting incident is the taking of Persephone's story in the hymn to Demeter. And we're just going to put a big pin in that one. I'm sorry, y'all. We can't break that one down right now. We're going to move on. But does anyone have thoughts about that narrative that we want to like discuss here without going deep into Persephone or Demeter of it? We're doing their episodes next, so I have to save something.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think we'd get lost in the sauce if we tried to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's it. And really, that story is mostly just to explain the changing of the seasons anyway. So it's not really about Hades at all.
Just like, it's such an interesting story because the idea that he just like saw this one girl chilling and like Zeus got it. I mean, that gets into the whole like ownership of women, right? And the fact that Demeter was never heard, even though she is sister and wife and mother-in-law in this situation, and then Persephone was never heard. And I don't know, it's such an interesting story, and I think everyone loves it also because in mythology, because Hades isn't talked about a lot, he doesn't have a lot of like affairs or other children. It's just like he has his wife. And that is so rare that I think it gets romanticized. Because it's like he loves his wife. And he's the only one of all of the gods who is just like devoted to his wife. It's just like, you know, maybe she didn't want to be his wife. And that's a whole different issue.
Yeah, it is. It is complicated. No, you're right. We're going to get lost in the sauce. Now I want to get
Yeah,
into
exactly.
it. Okay. Yeah, and even when like it gets romanticized, you're right. Because it's like, oh, Hades didn't have affairs. But there are like two figures from mythology that were noted as being like consorts or like lovers for Hades. And it was Minth, who was an underworld nymph, and Luce? I
have no idea.
I don't know. Luce, my roommate and I. Yeah, who was like an oceanid nymph, and they both hooked up with Hades at one point in time. And sometimes it's like, oh, it's before he married Persephone, and he had nothing to do with them afterwards. And sometimes it was like when he was with Persephone, and then he hooked up with him, and they were or at least Minth was boasting about how like she was better than Persephone, and she was going to be the new queen of the underworld. And either Demeter and or Persephone rolled up and killed her for that. But yeah, I think the interpretation of like, oh, Hades only has Persephone and he's so devoted to his wife. And you're right, that is like is over romanticized in a sense, because actually here are other two figures of mythology that prove he was kind of just like any other god. But I'm not mad about the former interpretation. Like I like that one quite a bit.
I know.
We'll talk so much about it later.
One nice thing. I know.
Yes, we deserve a nice thing.
Truly.
The other times that Hades is like more of a presence is usually just when someone else, and I made this list that I call folks that fucked around and found out in the underworld. Top of the list, we've got Orpheus.
Yes.
Play a sweet jam. Couldn't keep his eyes on the road in front of him.
No.
We've next up Theseus and Perseus, who thought it'd be a super fun idea to kidnap Persephone so she could be Perseus' wife.
It's crazy, that poor girl.
That poor girl! This was after they had kidnapped Helen. Yes, that one. When she was 8. Hades imprisons them in the underworld for a while. Mm-hmm. We got Hercules, who actually did only want to borrow Hades' dog, so he wasn't trying to steal anyone and bring it back to life. And he did ask permission to do this. So Hades was like, yeah, man, go off. And while Hercules was down there, he did go ahead and save Theseus because they were buds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perseus still in the underworld to this day. Fun fact. A lot of people don't know that. Oh. There was Sisyphus, who thought he would fuck around and find out twice in attempting to cheat death.
He succeeded the first time.
He did, and thought he would push his luck. And Hades does not approve.
No.
And the last one is Dionysus, who, after he becomes a god, Dionysus goes to his underworld to rescue his mother Semele, who died before he was born. But he doesn't bring her back to life. He just brings her to Mount Olympus to be a goddess. So, like, hashtag loophole.
Also, he's a god. He can do a lot more than something like Hercules can do. Yeah,
exactly. And I did think, because I was reading through the list of, like, folks who'd gone to the underworld to try to rescue someone, and Dionysus wasn't listed on it. And I think it's because when I went to, like, look Dionysus specifically, like, Hades is never mentioned in that Dionysus myth. Like, he's not an element or an obstacle or anything that Dionysus had to deal with. He was just allowed to do. So I think you're right. It's because he was a god.
So, like, Hades just kind of stepped to the side. Yeah.
I just want him up in my place. That's all I need. Like,
I just want him to leave.
They won't go back to the mortal world. I just want him at my place.
Yeah. As long as they're not going back to life, it's fine, because that's technically his job. Don't let the souls go back to being alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those keeping track, that is 4 out of 6 who would not recommend fucking around in the underworld to find out.
Not bad, though. Two of them did a good job. They survived. They got what they wanted. It's very rare.
Very rare, yeah. It was literally you had to be either Hercules or a god.
Yeah.
All right, I'm trying to figure out how to segue into this thing that I deeply went off on.
I had read, so I was like reading before I came onto the podcast, and I was reading this part about it too. It was like very Voldemort-y of him to not want to say his name.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, Hades is one of the gods, or like...
Entities.
Well, I think I'll just say my like thesis thing, or the thing, and then we can get into this. Hades doesn't appear in a lot of myths. And the reason you will find is because, well, the ancient Greeks were so afraid of death that they never talked about Hades because they didn't want to get his attention. Mm-hmm. And they will say that is also why he has so many nicknames and epitaphs. Like, they would call him Zeus of the underworld. Or this one that was like Plauton, which means wealthy. And that was an association with the wealth under the earth that was said to belong to him. And like other places, we'll note these things too. There was one thing I found that claimed when folks would do sacrifices to Hades, they would avert their eyes and like look away out of fear. I would also like to note that the source I found for that was a Hungarian classical philosophy scholar named, I'm going to butcher this, I'm so sorry, Karli Karani. And I think that's very fascinating. He clearly was a man who did a lot of research and knew what his game was. He also claimed that Hades and Dionysus were the same god. So,
ooh.
I'm not...
The god of death and the god of partying and wine are the same person.
Mm-hmm. His whole thing was like, well, in the hymn to Demeter, there's a lot of like life and death. And Dionysus would be just another version of Hades. And Dionysus is also a god that has chthonic things because he does go to the underworld and rescue his mother and bring her back. It is interesting. And I'm not saying this gentleman was wrong or not a reliable source. I'm just saying maybe a grain of salt.
I feel like it's a big claim that I wouldn't agree with, but I think it is an interesting one.
Yes, I don't fault him for having it. I just perhaps disagree and therefore put other things he claims into question.
Yeah.
There was also a line when I was trying. Okay, the problem I was having is I'm just really hung up on the notion of like, oh, they don't talk about Hades because they're scared of him. Right. But anytime that was stated with like a source, the source was just a collection of mythology stories written by another like philosopher, or not philosopher, but like I couldn't find like a first-hand source of some sort of mythological text that like stated this outright, which on one hand makes sense. It's not like there was someone writing in their diary that was like, and at Nana's funeral, no one mentioned Hades because, you know, that guy's scary as hell. We don't talk about him.
Yeah. But I also wonder, because of the lack of like information on him or even first-hand accounts about him, maybe everyone was scared to write about him.
Yeah, and that's usually the conclusion that's drawn. But another figure that does not have accounts, is not portrayed in myth or art, is Hestia, who we talked about on a recent episode. And no one claims that it was because they were afraid of Hestia. The reasoning is given is because the hearth was so valued and so like revered and respected that the notion of Hestia going off with the other gods and doing things and not being present in the hearth would have been like culturally disrespectful.
I also love the idea that people are afraid of making a home. They're like, God, that's terrifying. Don't look at the hearth. That's so scary.
We're so, can't. The responsibility.
Don't make a meal.
Don't never. Sit outside. No. Just get fast food all day, every day. Sit under a tree and dream.
I guess it's easier to assume that they're scared of death and revere the hearth than like assuming the other way around.
Yeah, and it does make sense. And then the other evidence is often like, oh, well, Hades had so many nicknames and epitaphs because they didn't want to draw his attention. And I was like, bet, yeah. Do you know who also had a bunch of nicknames and epitaphs? Apollo, who everyone says they loved so much.
Well, it's because he was the sun.
Yeah, and my thing is like, I'm not saying that the idea that they were afraid of Hades is wrong necessarily. But like,
you're just calling it into question.
I'm calling it maybe there was a more nuanced idea rather than just, old-timey superstitions.
I mean, but old-timey superstitions ran the world back then.
That's true.
Yeah, I guess everything we talk about is old-timey superstition.
Yeah, it's all mythology.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what the point is. Oh my god. Okay, sorry. So, there's this passage that a lot of different sources would cite from the Iliad, where Agamemnon's basically like, yeah, we hate Hades the most because he's unrelenting. And I could not find that passage in my copy of the Iliad. And I realized it was because Robert Fagles, actually, who has the translation that we refer to, because I don't have Emily Wilson's translation yet, he refers to it as like death being the one who is unrelenting. So I hit up our podcast Discord and was like, does anybody have Emily Wilson's translation I'd like to reference? And no, but Emily from Monster Donuts, local classics scholar.
I was going to say, good resource.
Best resource, honestly.
Yeah.
Pulled up the ancient Greek text and checked it out for me and did confirm that the word used in the text is the word for Hades.
Oh, so specifically Hades.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Fagles was doing some interpretation.
I think it's also very interesting that, a lot of modern religions, like the bigger religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all think about death in a very positive way because the afterlife is such a positive thing. And the fact that your entire goal in life is to make it to a positive space in the afterlife. And like in Hinduism and Buddhism, it's not really about it's about reaching nirvana at some point and just being so good in your life that you get this reward. So it's fun to look at ancient religions like Greek mythology where they're so afraid of death, and like the whole point is just like you don't think about the underworld, you think about just living your life, and then you don't talk about the underworld because it's so opposite of what we see now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I would think that is often because even though we have the idea, like, as we talked about earlier, the underworld being divided into like 3 different places, and Hades is the one who's in charge of the place where people are like punished for what they did in life and the place where they are rewarded for what they did in life, death was still so scary and terrible and unspoken, largely because that concept of of death being a place where your actions in life are judged accordingly came what we would consider very, very late in the context of these stories. Because as another thing we mentioned, like in our last episode about the underworld, is how very early on, like the earliest ones we have, like the Iliad, the Odyssey, the underworld is just this place of like shades and shadows where the dead just exist and linger. And when he goes to the underworld, Odysseus speaks to Achilles, and Achilles basically is like, I would rather be employed by the poorest man on earth than be king in here, because it sucks, my guy. It's like, I don't care how much they sing my praises up there. I'm dead now, and it's terrible. And that was before anybody was being forced to like push boulders up a hill. So I almost think it's kind of relates to like what I said about like Hades in the Rick Riordan books earlier, with how he's, because like he's in the first one, it makes it the way it was like preset. Rick Riordan has to like balance that with later more nuanced takes. When because early versions of the underworld were like, bad, do not speak of, we hate it. Even when later on, when it became a place where, hey, if you live good, you can go to Elysium here. It was still like, but Hades, though, it's hard to reconcile this very ancient, like established concept of our character and cultural relationship with this figure.
I do like the concept, though, like what we're talking about of like, oh, you know, ancient Greeks couldn't even speak his name. And then in Rick Riordan's version of Hades, he feels super isolated and unwelcome with his own family and amongst mortals. And so does Nico. And I think that's a good interpretation of that and a good way to play it into a story.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. 'Cause I think like earlier I was thinking like that sense of like isolation and resentment doesn't appear to exist in the text and in this quote source material, because there's not much. But you're absolutely right. I think it is like, it's a great interpretation with viewing the actual real world relationship with this mythological figure. And I also think maybe, rather than it just be an idea of like fear and superstition, it could also be this place of death is such a concrete thing, this like immovable, impassable notion of like life and death, that it could also have been like Hades doesn't run around because death doesn't do that either. Even though, to clarify, we know Hades is not death. That is a different guy. Hades is god of the underworld, but don't at me. We know. Yeah.
I also like the idea that maybe ancient peoples didn't really, like, were very afraid of death because it came at such an early age, because no one had vaccines and Tylenol. So they all died at like 30.
It just could come at any time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also, you know what, death actually was just running amok.
Yeah, it's just everywhere constantly.
Well, you know, on that downer of a note, Manasa, do you want to tell us more about your Hades book? Because it's time for us to talk about Hades and popular culture.
Oh, yes. Okay, so this was really fun for me because, so I have to make sure that it's the right name. Have a hot one, Hades. I think that's exactly what it's called. Have a hot time, Hades. So the series was called Myth-o-Mania. And it suddenly popped into my head. I think I forgot that I had like pre-ordered one of the like Heroes of Olympus books when I was in college, and it arrived at my dorm, and I was really surprised. And as I was reading it, I was talking to my roommate about this Myth-o-Mania series, and I was like, I loved them as a child. Does it still hold up? So I found them at the library and like got the ebooks, and I reread the first 2. They're still really fun. I recommend it. Takes you 15 minutes to read. There's like definitely for children. And
Damn, sounds like our next really Remyth episode, DJ.
There's a lot of really silly concepts in it. Like, I think they make him the oldest. He's not the eldest child, but in the books those they made him the eldest, and he's like very older brother energy, and he's just like such an angel. But because I loved those so much, and I loved the Phone Home Persephone books, I was like always hunting for like good Persephone Hades books, but I'm not like trying to get into like, I'm not someone who really loves romance books. Not all about that.
Okay.
And the thing that is popular right now, or was popular before Lore of Olympus came out, was the series about like Hades and Persephone, but it's like your typical, like there's a shirtless man on the cover, and he's like in the mafia, but he's also Hades, and also he like wants to possess her, and it's like really gross and kind of cringy.
Yeah.
But then Lore of Olympus came out, and I started reading it when it first popped up on web comics on my phone. Webtoons, yeah. And I was just like, I found a picture of it because it was just like floating around Tumblr back in the day, and I got really into it. So like, and then I went and so then I love Lore of Olympus. I've been keeping up with it for like however many years it's been published. Hades Town I went and saw on Broadway. It's my only Broadway show I've ever seen.
Nice.
We're going in November. We finally are going to see it.
Oh,
I'm so excited. I'll be very excited to be able to talk about it on this podcast,
I know,
like
it's
with
gonna be
more
great.
depth
wait.
as a side point, because it's like, I'm so excited.
I've seen it twice now. I saw it in New York, and then it came to Seattle, and I made Aaron, my co-host, go with me, and it was very fun. It was a really good... It's just like the music. That one's a really good one. So all of the things, and obviously Hercules, I had that on VHS. I watched it, like, there was a period of my life I had to watch it once a week. Like, I loved that. And so for me, Hades has always been like a super positive character. And so I'm always hunting for more on him. And it's just like, it's never what I really want, which is unfortunate, but I'm always curious. So I really have to hear about this girl goddess queen book you mentioned earlier.
I was about to say, based on the descriptions you have presented for like the version of Hades you have liked, and then also just mentioning how Persephone in Phone Home Persephone is an annoying girl who kind of follows him home, I think you would love Girl Goddess Queen.
I'm going to order it right now.
Yes, you have to order it from Blackwell because it's not published in the United States. It does not have a North American publisher right now. It is only available in, well, it's available in like Europe. But yeah, I'd order it from Blackwell because they had free international shipping. So that's how I got my copy.
Oh, okay. International shipping is amazing.
Yes. And then, casual reminder to our listeners, we are doing a review rally. If you leave us a happy review, take a screenshot and send it to the email at musesofmythology@gmail.com. We will enter you into a drawing to win a copy of Girl Goddess Queen. This is not affiliated with the author or the publisher. I will just buy you a copy and mail it to you.
Amazing.
Because I need more people to read this book. Anyway, so the premise is a YA rom-com fake dating enemies to lovers retelling of Hades and Persephone.
Oh my god.
It sounds so bubblegum pop, and it's not. It is the most heart-wrenchingly real take on what life would have been like for a woman in ancient society, and the like very real challenges and fears that Persephone faced when Zeus said, "Time to marry you off." And so she is the one who takes it into her own hands to go to the underworld, because the underworld is a place where they tell the stories of like, oh, scary monsters and death and stuff. But never once is there a story about what, like, those terrible stories, like the kind that happens to young women in Oceanus or Olympus. So that's where she goes. And so she meets Hades, who is, I can't tell you about Hades, but is good, is very good. Like him a lot.
Okie dokes.
And I will say, I think oftentimes we get a version of Hades in pop culture when, if he is not the villain, we have peak sad boy Hades.
Yes, that's true.
And just casual shout out to Kamisama no Asubi, which I only mentioned because I remembered that it was an anime that existed based off a dating sim video game, and I watched every episode of it. And all of the love interests are different hot boy variations of gods. Hades is one of them. He is peak sad boy energy. I say this to underline that Girl Goddess Queen Hades, not sad boy energy. No sad boy energy. Is soft cinnamon roll who could murder a titan. Not sad boy energy at all. So I highly recommend. But yeah, the Hades in that, and it's very cool in Girl Goddess Queen how it so deeply leans into the concept of him as king of the underworld and the things that Hades does to protect his realm and the fronts he puts on to continue to essentially adhere or play the politics of this world that men like Zeus have created, and what he has to do in order to continue to hold power in this world to protect his realm from the things that men like Zeus and Poseidon do in theirs.
I like that.
B. Fitzgerald is like masterfully done in the interpretations of these characters. Also Styx, great character, she's just there.
That's awesome.
DJ is gonna get sick of hearing me say these same things over and over again about Girl Goddess Queen.
It'll be fun.
Oh, thank you, DJ.
Yeah.
I will say the other thing that I know Hades from is the video game Hades, which I have, and
yes. Oh my gosh,
dying on.
Oh yeah, how far are you? What's your favorite weapon?
Oh my god, no, I'm not good at video games, and I got it right before I started grad school because I was like, this will be fun.
Oh, wow.
And then I ended up choosing a profession where I'm on my computer all the time, so I'm not doing computer games anymore.
Yeah.
Rough.
So I'm reading instead, because thank God. But I loved the art, and and it has like one of the highest rated games, and it was on sale, so I bought it. So I think I made like 6% of the way through. Like he's still in the top levels of the underworld.
Oh.
No, like
you have not escaped
the
yet.
art.
Beautiful.
Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. I gotta know who are you first? Who are you trying to romance first?
You can romance. I see that. I don't know.
I was about to be like, did you get far enough in the dialogue to learn you can romance characters?
That's me. I'm gonna have to get back into it.
You can romance Than, you can romance Megara, and you can romance Adusa. You can also do them all at the same time. You don't have to do.
It's all 3 different types of.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't get jealous. It's excellent.
Yeah.
That's so fun. Okay, I might have to, now that I'm just kind of chilling, I might have to tap back into that.
Yes, highly recommend. And I want to talk, I think the way Hades is portrayed in Hades' game is so uniquely different than any other way he is portrayed in any piece of media, wherein he is not the outright villainous villain a la Disney Hades, where he's like scheming and smirking and causing harm to like uplift his own power. But we're also not getting like a romance cinnamon roll kind version of Hades, because he will kill his own son if he has to. Mm-hmm. Like he's very harsh, and I think it's a very accurate in this nature of interpretation to what Hades represents, where he is like very like there is no escape, no one leaves the underworld. That applies to my own kid. I don't care what you're trying to do. And no spoilers for Hades, I guess, because I would very much want you to be able to experience as that character grows and the relationship between Zagreus and Hades grows, and you get more insight into Hades' motivations and the reasons he behaves as he does to Zagreus. Chef's kiss. So good. It doesn't make it okay, but it makes it a fascinating take on the king of the underworld.
All right, I will definitely try to get back into that. I kept dying, and I got so frustrated, and then I just never went back to it. I'm not good at keeping up with games.
That's fair. The good news is the actually only way to progress in the story is you have to die. If you don't die, it doesn't matter if you escape. You're never going to build relationships or get plot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of rewards that's good to know. For just going through the level.
Mm-hmm. It's
and
literally
you spend
like
them after you die.
Yeah, it's charming. Just wanted to mention Once Upon a Time, because we talked about it in the last episode where we had Robert. Because, as we mentioned in the last episode, they had a god-awful season that was in the underworld, and Hades was there. And I only mentioned because he has this weird line about how Zeus is my big brother and he got everything. It's like, that is factually incorrect, actually, to the myth. Famously, Zeus is actually the youngest.
Yeah, but in the Disney one, it is, in fact, he is the little brother, because Zeus says at the start of the movie, little brother, how you liking the party?
Ooh.
Does he?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
I think he just says Hades. My brother, how are you liking the? We'll have to watch it again, I guess.
Brother.
Yeah, can't get to that. It just, it's the one thing that like, so it's like, I get dangerously close to saying, no, you did a bad adaptation. When they're like fundamental things that I'm fine with you changing everything or altering things or reinterpreting things for the culture you're telling a story for. But it's like, no, but fundamentally, Zeus is the youngest because that's how the story worked. That's how Rhea saved him. Like when Persephone is in the underworld in the middle of summer. The hell are we doing, gang? Read one goddamn book. The point of summer is that she's not in the underworld. What are we doing? This is Darien puts the Lightning Thief movie on blast.
And she sleeps with the child. Oh, God.
I can't even.
What a stacked cast, though.
Yeah, right. That's the thing. It's like, wow, this cast, chef's kiss, so good.
Yeah.
I feel like we did gloss over Lore Olympus just a little bit. And I love
Lore Olympus is wonderful.
I'd love to speak on it just for a second because I weirdly feel like we don't often get guests who also have read all of Lore Olympus.
I know, it's a little strange.
So,
I am a big fan. I bought my friend the physical copy when it came out because I wanted her to read it. And it's just such a big fan. The art, the storyline.
Rachel Smith is so talented. Yeah.
And it's also been fun to watch her art progress, like from the beginning of the series, where it was a little bit a different style and she kind of come more comfortable with her art and then added music to it. Oh, I love it. I'm a big fan.
Yep. I love Hades as a like narrative allegory for overcoming trauma. And simultaneously early in the story being a narrative allegory for allowing the trauma that you have not successfully overcome to continue to allow you to put yourself in situations where you are being mistreated because you think that is what you deserve based on the trauma you experienced. And how the only way to be able to overcome that and also establish better relationship is you have to admit that and work on that. And sometimes it's okay if the reason you are willing to put in that work is because you met someone who you want to grow for.
Yeah, I really love that. Also, how Apollo is just like the worst person.
Holy shit.
And that's the first time I've seen him like that.
Yeah, that's the matter of perspective. Like, yes, this is absolutely how you should actually be writing Apollo. Except for Rick Riordan.
I was going to say.
Apollo is a good boy who tried very, very hard. Okay?
Yeah.
I
like
him in Trials of Apollo.
Those.
He's growing.
Yeah.
Like you said, the gods behave as they are because they are gods and they have no concept of empathy or remorse or consequence. Those are things that only humans have to grapple with. This is not an Apollo episode.
No. But I do love the way in Lore of Olympus you have like Olympus and the godly world is like very modern, but then you go into a mortal world and it's still back in ancient Greece where they're being worshipped.
Yes.
I really like that. That was a very clever, creative part.
Yeah, I think it also like serves to like demonstrate the distance between like gods and mortals and why gods would just so be callous about mortals because they are so nothing compared to the gods.
Yeah.
Rachel, every chapter, we're on hiatus right now and I'm dying.
I know.
But
I just imagine the people who didn't fast pass sitting there seeing 3 chapters that they could read right now.
You just gotta, I know. I just do it. It's okay. It's if you can, it's always worth it.
Right. I've never used the fast pass. I've always waited.
Oh my gosh, do you have 3 chapters you could be reading right now, but you haven't fast passed?
I have a lot of chapters because I took a little break from trying to be on my phone less, and I failed because I'm on TikTok so much more. And so I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, I have so many to catch up on. I have quite a few.
I'm so glad I didn't mention what happened in the most recent chapter then. I was almost just like, oh, good, we have a guest who's read it all. Wonderful. I'm so glad I didn't just be like, and then could you believe?
So, yeah, almost.
Isn't it crazy that?
No. Okay, well, what did I do when we were on your podcast? So let me tell you about Disney Sea, actually. So what I didn't get into is these books, all right? And they're about, no. I think we're in a space to wrap, but do we have any other, like, Hades thoughts, things we didn't get to cover? Like, this was the episode for you to come on and, like, talk about Hades, and I want to make sure you felt like you got your time's worth.
So sorry. Another thing that in not pop culture, but that exists that also made me kind of obsessed with Hades, but it's on the other end where he's the villain, is the statue, The Rape of Persephone. It's made out of marble, and it's by Bernini, and it's in Italy, and it was made in like the 1620s, I think. But it's made. The reason that it is one of the most stunning pieces I have ever seen. And it's the detail, like the fact that it's made out of marble. And if you zoom in on his hands, the way they've imprinted into Persephone, because he's basically thrown her over his shoulder. Yeah. And so his fingers are like in her skin and it looks like skin. And someone to have made that out of marble is insane to me. And so that is one of the pieces of art that like always captured, like I think about statues that I really love. It's like a horrible story. And it's one of the few stories that's like, he captures the story and the sadness of like the fact that Persephone did not consent to any of this, which is I think very often overlooked, really well into what he created. So I mean, that was one thing that also in the lineage of like loving Hades that really ignited, cemented him as someone that I really like as like just as a character, whether he's good or bad. I just like think he's interesting.
Yeah, it's the kind of character that offers storytellers and creatives a lot to work with. Yeah, I'm looking at the statue right now, and yeah, it is like his hand on her, like as she's leaning away from him, and like it's. Yeah, you're right, and it is
so good.
You can tell. Wow, you definitely spent more time on those fingers and polishing that than you did on whatever his mouth is doing, didn't you? You know, it's okay. I cannot judge. I couldn't do it.
I don't. Yeah, I know. I also don't look at like he's also real ripped. Like good for him.
He's just shredded.
He's shredded.
Never skip a day at the gym.
His hair is also so crazy. Like I need to know his curly girl hair routine. Yes! Like well done.
What is that? He only washes it in cold water. Absolutely, that hair has never seen warm water in its life.
No.
The River of Lethe is actually a great conditioner.
That's it. That's what it is.
DJ, I don't want us to leave without you being able to tell us about how... Oh, you told us about Hades last week in Smite, actually.
Yeah. No.
No, Chiron. It was Charon and...
It was Charon and Cerberus.
Yes. So DJ, how's he in Smite? Yeah?
He's fun. He's good. He's annoying to deal with at times. As is literally
I like what you say about every character.
Yeah. Every single god in the game is annoying to deal with.
It's good, fun, and annoying to deal with.
Yep. He's got some fun skins. I can read his lore if we want to do that.
Yes. I actually kind of want to finish up on the Smite lore because, Manasa, I don't know if you know this, the Smite lore, borderline unhinged every time. Goes weirdly hard for just a battle royale game.
That's so funny.
Yeah, because they have their own overarching story of like their lore, which is like, oh, well, every god has a reason for being at this battleground right now. And it's kind of funny. But since he's one of the older ones, it might not have set in for that one yet.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just go ahead and start. Inevitably, death sends everyone to Hades, god of the underworld. In the end, he always gets his way. Eldest son of the Titan Kronos and Rhea, Hades was swallowed by his father as an infant along with 5 other siblings. Zeus, the younger brother, escaped this fate and freed them once he'd grown strong enough to battle Kronos. Together, the 6 siblings defeated the Titans and banished them to the dark realm of Tartarus. Now the reigning gods Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades drew lots for dominion. Hades drew the underworld. Of the few that have entered the underworld and come back, all speak dismally of the place, never wishing to return. Yet Hades himself rarely leaves the subterranean realm, constantly seeking ways to grow the numbers of the dead. When he desired a wife, Hades captured the radiant Persephone, daughter of the goddess Demeter. Concealed in the underworld, none could reach her, so Demeter cursed the land with a great famine. The other gods pleaded with her to end it, lest she destroy mankind, but she would not relent until her daughter was returned. Hades finally let Persephone leave, though not before feeding her pomegranate seeds. Having consumed the fruit, she was bound forever to Hades and required to return to her husband once per year to eat of the seeds again. This, it is said, is a time of mourning and the cause of winter. While many fear death and view it as evil, in truth Hades endeavors only to keep balance. Mm-hmm. He is stern but fair as a god of the dead and the underworld. He views his authority on this matter absolute, forbidding anyone to leave his realm and growing wrathful when disobeyed or when someone tries to cheat death or steal from him. For everyone, death is unavoidable, and service to Hades is inevitable, even the gods.
See, at the end, it goes hard. Service to Hades is inevitable, even the gods. Yeah, you're right. That one was very much just, so here's the lore. Like, here's just some standard lore. I think they started
doing that more when they added their first pantheon, or like their newest, like the first new pantheon, which was the Japanese one. I couldn't exactly tell you when they started doing that, but I started noticing it.
I got curious. I'm like, wait, is Persephone in Smite?
Yeah.
Yes, she is. Her lore does go hard. It gives a very different picture of the story you just told us.
Yeah, I think it's more along the lines of she's also leading the underworld.
We will talk about that when we get to Persephone because I love what I see here. And her design. So good.
Her design is sick. Like, honestly, I think it's one of the coolest designs for Persephone I've seen.
Oh, yeah. Manasa, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your... I'm just so delighted that your love for Hades comes from this childhood book series. And thank you for sharing it with us. That was so charming and delightful.
Of course. I hope if you guys pick it up, I hope it holds up. Because that's what I remember from it. So
I'm so jazzed. So please tell our listeners where they can find more of you because they're going to want more of you.
Well, I have a Percy Jackson podcast. It's a kind of a read-along. We go chapter by chapter. Currently, we are starting the last book of the Trials of Apollo. That is Camp Half Pod. So you can find us on any social media, Camp Half Pod. And me and my co-host, Aaron, we kind of have an interesting vibe. And we've had Darien and DJ on before. Yes. So if you want to hear them again, they're in one of our more recent episodes.
It was delightful. It was the one where Jason died, y'all, so you know you're going to want to listen to that. Start there and go back to the beginning.
I also have, I didn't know Jason was going to die, so they got to experience that with me. Yeah.
Oh, so funny. You were so mean to the kid.
I was so sad. I was so mad at myself.
And you did mention a TikTok. Do you want to plug your TikTok?
No, I don't post anything on TikTok.
Oh, you lurk. Just a viewer.
Yeah, I lurk. Yeah, so nothing to post there, but I do love watching TikToks. Unfortunately, I need to stop because it's consumed a little bit too much of my life.
You know what? Fair. I think that is common for anyone who falls into social media. Thank you again so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Listeners, thank you for listening. What do you think about Hades? Are we wrong for liking this character? Did we miss your favorite Hades in pop culture? Come yell at us on Instagram. Or if you're a patron, you can do so on Discord.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
And until next time, don't be like Zeus.
Don't be like Zeus.
Muses of Mythology is created and hosted by Darien and DJ Smartt. It's edited by Darien Smartt. The show is produced by Darien and DJ Smartt, as well as
Tim O'Connor, The Crystal Con Man, Nicholas Miller. Our music is Athens Festival by Martin Hain. And our cover art is by Audrey Miller. You can find her on Instagram at Bombshell Nutshell Art.
Want more Muses of Mythology? Support the show on Patreon. Just $1 gets you exclusive bonus content. Get more at patreon.com/Muses of Mythology.
You can also support the show by leaving a review at lovethepodcast.com/Muses of Mythology. Or tell a friend why you love the show.
Don't forget to check out all of our episodes and episode transcripts at musesofmythology.com.
Thanks for listening.